How your mind shapes reality. Reality feels solid. It feels external, absolute, and indifferent to our inner lives. The sky is blue. Gravity pulls us down. The sun rises. These facts seem immune to interpretation. And yet, every philosopher who has looked carefully at the human experience has come to a humbling conclusion. We never perceive the world as it is. We only perceive it as it appears to us. And what shapes that appearance more than anything else is the mind. Your thoughts, beliefs, emotions, memories, traumas, and expectations. These act like lenses through which the world is filtered. They don't just color your experience of reality. They construct it. Not in the naive sense that you can manifest a different universe by wishing it into being, but in the deeper, more unsettling sense that what you call reality is always already entangled with your inner world. This is the story of how your mind shapes your reality, and why understanding this is both liberating and dangerous. Plato's cave and the shadows on the wall. The idea that perception can be deceiving is ancient. Over 2,000 years ago, Plato offered a parable that still defines the problem. The allegory of the cave. Prisoners, he says, are chained inside a cave, facing a blank wall. Behind them, a fire casts shadows of objects passed between it and the prisoners. To the prisoners, the shadows are reality. They've never seen the real objects, let alone the world beyond the cave. They live in a simulation of truth, mistaking illusion for substance. Plato's message. Most people live in a perceptual cave, mistaking appearances for reality and truth for what they're conditioned to see. Escaping the cave, awakening to truth, is painful. It requires turning around, breaking the chains, and confronting a light so bright it's blinding. And yet, even if we escape the cave of social illusion, can we escape the deeper cave? The cave of the mind. Kant and the unknowable real. Immanuel Kant took Plato's insight and refined it with precision. He argued that we do not see the world as it is, but only as it appears to us through the structures of our own cognition. Our minds filter reality through concepts like space, time, and causality. These aren't properties of the world. They're properties of the human way of knowing. Kant called the reality beyond our perception phenomenon, the thing in itself. And he believed we could never access it directly. What we call reality is really a phenomenon, our mind's construction of the thing. This might sound abstract, but it has radical consequences. Everything you see, feel, or understand is mediated by your mind. The world you think you know is not the world itself. It is your brain's best rendering of it. In a sense, we're all still in Plato's cave. But now, the cave is not society. It's your own skull. Psychology and the stories we tell ourselves. Modern psychology has taken Kant's insights and run with them, straight into the heart of our lived experience. The brain is not a camera that records reality. It is a storyteller. It constructs a coherent narrative out of fragments of data, shaped by memory, emotion, and expectation. Think about the last time you felt anxious. You probably noticed more threats. Neutral faces looked cold. Ordinary setbacks felt like signs of failure. Now think about a time when you were in love. The same world felt alive, meaningful, even enchanted. Nothing out there had changed, but your inner lens had. This isn't a glitch. It's how perception works. Cognitive psychology reveals dozens of mental biases that distort our view of reality. Confirmation bias leads us to seek evidence for what we already believe. The framing effect alters our choices based on how options are presented. Availability bias makes rare events seem common if they're emotionally charged. Your beliefs don't just sit inside your mind like furniture. They filter what you notice, how you interpret it, and what it means. The world bends, subtly but powerfully, to your expectations. Neuroscience and the predictive brain. Even in neuroscience, the idea that we see reality is being overturned. The dominant model today is not that the brain passively receives information from the world, but that it predicts the world. According to the predictive processing theory, Your brain is constantly generating a model of what it expects to happen next, and then it updates that model based on incoming sensory data. In other words, perception is a kind of controlled hallucination, your brain's best guess of what's out there. You don't see the world raw. You see a hypothesis. This is why optical illusions work. They reveal the brain's predictions being tricked. It's also why trauma can distort perception. If your brain expects danger, it will interpret even safe situations as threatening. If your model of the world is broken, your reality will be too. So what happens when you change the model? When you retrain your brain not just through thought, but through experience, reality changes. Spiritual traditions and the illusion of the world. Long before neuroscience, mystics in the East understood this principle, not as theory, but as experience. In Buddhism, the world we perceive is Maya, illusion, not because it doesn't exist, but because it's distorted by craving, aversion, and ignorance. To wake up, to become enlightened, is to see things as they are, without the projections of ego and desire. In Vedanta, the self, Atman, is not separate from the world, Brahman. The idea that there's a separate me looking out at a separate world is itself a mental construction. Remove that illusion, and the boundary dissolves. Even in Stoicism, perception is key. Epictetus said, "It's not things themselves that disturb us, but our opinions about them." Two people lose the same job. One crumbles. The other adapts. The difference isn't in the event. It's in the interpretation. Spiritual traditions teach that liberation doesn't come from changing the world. It comes from changing the mind. The power and the danger. If the mind shapes reality, then it is our most powerful tool, and our most dangerous liability. On the one hand, this idea is liberating. It means you are not a passive victim of circumstance. You can choose your focus, train your mind, shift your beliefs, and in doing so, change the way the world appears to you. This is the foundation of cognitive behavioral therapy, of mindfulness practice, of stoic resilience. You can't control what happens, but you can control how you see it. On the other hand, this truth can lead to delusion. If we forget that reality still has a structure, if we believe we can reshape the world entirely by perception, we become blind to consequences, evidence, and truth. This is the peril of solipsism, of conspiracy thinking, of unchecked ideology. So we walk a knife's edge. Between freedom and fantasy. Between power and illusion. The key is not to abandon reality, but to take responsibility for the lens through which we meet it. Rebuilding the world from within. To truly understand that your mind shapes reality is not a call to magical thinking. It is a call to deep responsibility. The challenge is not to control the world. It's to understand the stories you're telling about it. Who taught you how to see the world? Was it your parents? Your culture? Trauma? Experience? What do you believe is possible, and who gave you that belief? What do you call failure? What do you call success? What do you fear, and why? These are not just psychological questions, they are ontological ones, questions about the very nature of being. Because your answers don't just describe your world. They create it. And when you begin to question the lens, you start to gain the power to reshape it. Not by force, but by clarity. Reality is not a fixed, objective landscape that we observe from the outside. It is an ever-shifting interplay between the world and the mind that perceives it. The mystic, the psychologist, and the philosopher all agree on this point, each in their own language. You see not the world, but your world. To understand this is to reclaim power, not over others, but over yourself. And when you take that power seriously, when you begin to shape your perceptions with awareness, humility, and depth, you don't just change your experience. You change your reality. You don't control what happens in the world, but you do control how the world happens through you. Your thoughts shape your lens. Your lens shapes your world. So sharpen it, question it, rebuild it intentionally. Because when you see differently, you live differently. And that changes everything. If this video challenged how you think or helped you see with new eyes, subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell to keep exploring deep ideas that most people never stop to question. And share your thoughts in the comments, because this isn't just a monologue. It's a dialogue. And philosophy only lives when we think together.